In this demo, we'll see how BluelightAI's software Cobalt helps automatically diagnose unknown problems with a computer vision model. In this scenario, an intelligence organization is responsible for tracking the locations of a fleet of airplanes using satellite imaging. They've built a computer vision model to automate the task of identifying airplanes of different types, and they're in the process of validating it for deployment. If this model fails to detect certain types of planes, this would of course defeat the purpose of having the model. With Cobalt, we will identify systematic detection errors that the model is making so that we can resolve them and have greater confidence in the performance of the model. The dataset we'll be using here is the Rare Planes dataset, which consists of around 8,500 tiled images of airplanes taken from satellite photography of airfields. The images are annotated with the airplane's locations and types, as well as some other metadata. The model we'll be using was shared with us by a learning partner. They introduced some known defects in training as a test of our capabilities. The model predicts the presence or absence of each of 6 different types of aircraft in each of the tiled images. We will use the images, the model predictions, and ground truth labels, and some embeddings generated from the images as inputs for our analysis with Cobalt. Here the embeddings are taken from the last convolutional layer of the classifier model, but many options are possible. Cobalt runs inside a standard Jupyter Notebook interface, so we'll use that to load in the data for analysis. This only takes a few lines of code before we're ready to see the results. We can view the results of the analysis in this interactive UI integrated into the Notebook interface. The centerpiece is this graph, produced by Cobalt as a map of the data as represented by the model internally. Each node corresponds with a group of images, and similar groups of images are linked together by edges in the graph. The colors of the nodes correspond with a Jacquard index score for the multi-label classifier. Yellow is good and blue is bad. Cobalt uses the graph and the similarities it represents to find groups of similar images that the model struggles with. Here we see a list of 3 groups that Cobalt automatically identified as problematic due to their low values of the performance score. Let's take a look at them. If we select the first group, we get a details view that shows the ground truth and the model predictions. Here we see that the ground truth only has a few planes in the images, just a couple of them, but the model is predicting that many more planes are present. Note that the scale is different between these 2 charts. Let's take a look at the images in this group by opening up the data table. We see that there are a lot of images with these large dark gray planes. The model says that these are large civil transports, basically airliners, but the ground truth data says that there are no planes in these images. It turns out that these planes are actually military transport planes, and that this class of plane was deliberately left out of the training data for the model. This was the defect that was introduced in training. Now let's look at the next group Cobalt identified. The model seems to be missing some detections here, specifically of large and small civilian airplanes. So let's take a look in the table. Now this is a larger group, so there might be more diversity in the images we see. One thing I notice is that it's hard to find the planes in some of these images. In some cases I can see a piece of a plane sticking out of the side, or there's a very small airplane in the corner of the image. So this merits some further investigation, but a reasonable hypothesis is that the model struggles with images where only a part of the airplane is visible. If we take a look at the third group, we see it's located out at the edge of this flare, which suggests that the model sees it as something significantly different from the rest of the data. And if we look at the images, we see something interesting. Unlike the previous tiles we've seen, these are not square. The reason for this is that the images come from larger satellite collections of large strips of terrain, and the tiles that end up extending past the edge of the imaged region therefore have blank areas. And something seems to have gone wrong with the model's interpretation of these incomplete image tiles. It seems to label all of them as containing a small civilian airplane and nothing else. So in just a few minutes using Cobalt, we were able to find 3 important issues to address with this model. First, there's a class, military transport planes, that was missing from the training data in the model. To fix this, we probably need to retrain or fine-tune the model with data from this class. Second, some of the image tiles cut off large parts of a plane to be detected, which makes it hard for the model to accurately detect them. We should make sure that the pre-processing algorithm produces tiles that overlap sufficiently so that every plane is fully contained in at least one tile. Finally, the model doesn't handle incomplete image tiles well. This could be addressed either by controlling the pre-processing or by retraining the model with augmented data so that it is more robust to missing areas in a tile. Without Cobalt, finding and understanding these problems would be a manual process, which would mean trawling through all of these 8,500 images one by one looking for patterns. With Cobalt, important patterns of failure are immediately highlighted, making it easier to understand and fix them.